In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to correctly use the Global Skin add-on in Blender. What this add-on allows you to do is swap out the default skin textures for different humanoid models with a more realistic alternative. The results are really good, but the main problem is that not many people know how to properly use it, as there's very little instruction provided by the devs. So in this video, I will be showing you how to correctly set it up and use it efficiently. As a side note, I'm primarily a DAZ Studio to Blender user, so this video will utilize a DAZ character. But this same workflow will apply if you're using any other character models which this add-on is compatible with. First, I recommend you use the add-on after you have already posed and lit your character, as Blender's default scene lighting will not give you a detailed result. Global Skin requires good lighting, so use a nice studio-style HDRI and a sunlight for some contrast. Next, you need to set up your Blender scene so it can work with the Global Skin add-on. Set your viewport samples to about or near 1000, as you'll need to see very fine details. Next, make sure your light path settings are set to fast, as we want cycles to render as fast as possible in the viewport. Lastly, remove any camera effects you might have, such as depth of field, and make sure your compositor is set to disabled. If your character has hair, hide it. This will boost performance, as we'll only be working with the body. Crop render your character if you want a little extra performance. Make sure your original DAZ character is backed up by duplicating its collection and renaming it. Now, to use the Global Skin add-on effectively, I'm going to be setting up my own workspace to maximize efficiency. I start by duplicating my layout workspace, then shifting it to the end of my tab. I then name it Global Skin. Next, I reorganize my workspace, so I have a large shader editor panel on my right. I then move the Properties tab with the materials to the bottom. Now, we can open up the Global Skin add-on menu. For DAZ users, if you're using a Genesis 8 character, then select either G8 Feminine or G8 Masculine. Since I'm using a Genesis 9 character, I will be selecting DAZ 3D G9. Now select the head icon. You'll get a list of different body parts. These will apply the Global Skin material to the selected material in your tray. Let's start with the torso. In the material tray, select the body. Then in the Global Skin menu, select the body image. Press Apply Shader. You will then see that Global Skin has replaced your DAZ material. In the shader editor, you will see a control panel has appeared. Before we use that, let's replace all our DAZ materials. Now my character is using a DAZ HD Naval add-on, which has its own material. Luckily, it uses DAZ's default body UV map, so I can just reapply the Global Skin shader and it will seamlessly blend with the texture on the body. Next, select the material for each DAZ body part, then apply the same Global Skin body part to it. Once you're done, you should have a very white-looking character. If you zoom in on your character, you will see that the skin is now very detailed, to the point that now every pore and micro wrinkle is visible. How Global Skin works is that it has 5 skin types for different ethnicities. You can turn them on by going to the Skin Tone menu and sliding the skin bar to the right. But there is a problem, which is that Global Skin is applying its own skin texture to my character, while I want to use the skin texture which I originally applied in DAZ Studio. So how do I use that with Global Skin? First, you need to find what the name of that texture was. So what I do is unhide the backup character and go into its body material. I then go to the base color texture map and copy its name. I then return to my Global Skin character. Now, Global Skin does offer you a way to apply your own custom textures, but you don't get nearly enough functionality as with the built-in skin tone textures. So, I'll need to go inside the add-on. Click on the Global Skin shader menu group and press Tab. Now this spiderweb of nodes may be a little bit intimidating, but have no fear as we're only using one node from this. If you look over here, you'll see several rows of nodes. These are for the different skin tone sliders. If you want to use skin tone 1, zoom in on the top node stack and go to the image texture named Albedo 1. This is the global skin's default skin texture. Open the image drop-down menu and paste the name of the DAZ skin texture into the search bar. Once you have applied your DAZ skin texture, you will see it appear on your character. Global Skin will now be using your DAZ skin texture and applying all its enhancements to it. Now, we just need to go through all the Global Skin body part materials and swap out the Albedo 1 texture with the DAZ skin texture for that body part. Once you've done that, we can start customizing the values. The main issue now is basically using Global Skin, because when you change a value, the add-on then expects you to copy that value onto every material on your character, which is very time-consuming, so we need to simplify that process. Let's start with the skin tone saturation value. First, create a value node. Then copy the saturation values number. Paste that saturation value number into the value node. Then connect that value node to the saturation. Right-click and select Make Group. Press Tab to exit the group. Click the group's name and call it Saturation. Now all you have to do is copy that group and paste it into every global skin material and connect it to your selected skin tone's saturation value. Once you're done connecting all these nodes, go into the group. Now, if you change this value, you can change the result for the entire character. Now, of course, not to hate on orange people, but I'm going for a more natural skin tone, so I'm going to be setting this value to 1.4. Next, duplicate the group, then press this link button. This will disconnect the group and turn it into a copy. Rename it to hue. Then copy the hue value and paste that number into the value node in the new group. Now connect the new group to the hue node. Then copy and paste that node into every global skin material and connect it. Now we have a universal controller for the hue, which also means no matter what global skin material you're in, you'll always be able to make changes to the entire character. Let's add another group for the gamma. Again, duplicate the group, unlink it, and rename it. Copy the default value into the group's value node. Then connect that group to the global skin value. Then paste that group into every global skin material and hook it up. Some global skin materials will have unique settings. For example, the head material has color values for the face and nose. I don't want her to look like Rudolph, so I'm going to be changing the nose's tone to be a slightly lighter shade of pink. Also, in the head material, you'll find another global skin menu. This is for applying different types of makeup to your character. We don't need to use this for this tutorial, so just replace its connection with the main global skin menu. Now, let's add some more groups. We can do this in batches to increase efficiency, starting with the specular and roughness. Just copy 2 groups and repeat the same steps as before. Roughness and specular will control how shiny the skin is. Decreasing the roughness will make the skin more reflective, while increasing the specular will make the skin more shiny. You can also put these values into a single group if you find yourself constantly switching between them. Just rename the value nodes and then add them to a group. Rename the group's outputs so you can easily connect them. Then lastly, rename the group to something that fits its purpose. Now let's take a look at the normal maps, which are stored in a separate group and connected to the displacement output. Weight controls how strong the normal map is, while displacement gives you different options for the skin patterns. Due to how detailed global skin is, it can be very hard to see what changes these values have made, so I recommend you open up a pure ref file and use a screenshot tool to paste the results of each change you make to compare. I chose to go with a weight value of 0.002% and a displacement 1 value of 0.8. Next, create 2 groups for these inputs, then paste them into every material. Now, let's take a look at the global skin effects. You can use these values to create imperfections on the skin to boost realism. Let's start by setting up a group for the pores. Now, what's great about the pores effect is they can create noise on the skin, which can make it seem less like it's made of plastic. Next, let's add some subtle veins to the character. For this group, I wanted to control the value and the color, so I created a value node and an RGB node. I then copied the default values for the nodes and then created a group. Veins are very subtle on the human body, but are still noticeable, so use a very low value with a blue tint. Now that we have added several group nodes, let's now compare our global skin character to our original DAZ character. Again, use your screenshot tool and make a side-by-side comparison in PureRef. In my case, I realized I needed to tone down the saturation. I also felt the lips were a little washed out, so in the head material, I made them more red. After the changes, I took a new screenshot and compared. I felt the veins were too visible, so I reduced their strength. The new comparison looked good, so I moved on to some more optional values. If you want the skin to look slightly tanned, use the weight value. Make 2 value nodes and an RGB node, then add it to a group. Once done, I adjusted the values to give her arms a slight tan. If you want to use it on a certain body part, then cut the connections on the materials you don't need it on. In my case, I don't want the head or the legs to be affected. Now, because global skin doesn't include a fingernail material, they will still be using their original DAZ material, which will make them stand out once global skin is applied. So go into the nail material and adjust the factor for the color mix connected to the base color to reduce the white values in the nails. Now let's take a look at the strains. Strains allows you to add a color tint to your character. I like to use it to control how tanned my character can be. Now if you want your global skin character to match up with your DAZ character, then unhide it and move it so it's behind your global skin character. Once in position, I then adjust the strains until it roughly matched. I also adjusted the weights node as I felt the arms were a little too red. Now, let's zoom in and let the cycles render for a little bit. From this angle, you can clearly see the difference between global skin and DAZ's skin texture, as DAZ's skin looks very smooth and a little bit like plastic, while global skin feels warmer and textured. Now, we have set up universal controllers for global skin. But what if you wanted to set up an overlay on top of this texture? Let's say, for example, this WetFX overlay. First, import a new version of your character into Blender with this overlay applied. You don't need any diffeomorphic import settings as we just want to use the material. Copy that body and exit out of that scene. Then, in the global skin scene, create a new collection and paste it in. Then, move it out the way. Now go into the WetFX body material and copy all the nodes. Then, paste them into your global skin body material. Out of all these nodes, we just need the overlay texture, its bump node, and the DAZ top coat node group. I've also kept the DAZ skin texture, as we'll be using this temporarily before replacing it. First, connect the DAZ top coat node to the output. You will see that the character will turn black, but you will also see that the drips are now on the body. Go to the global skin group and connect its output to the top coat's BSDF. Global skin's textures will now project through the top coat. In the top coat settings, set specular 0 to 1, as this value makes the water invisible. Right now, the water looks very soapy, so let's change that to be more reddish. Use the roughness settings to change how shiny the water is on the skin to simulate different liquids. Now this is good, but I need more control. So let's create a density controller. Add in a mix shader node. Plug the global skin and the top coat into that node. Then create a color ramp. Plug the wet texture into that color ramp, and then plug that color ramp into the mix shader's factor. Now we can control how dense and sharp the water drips are. But we have another issue, which is that the normal maps are projecting their texture onto the water droplets. So we will need to create a mask for the normal map. First, hold Shift and drag a line through the connections for the bump map and the color ramp to create a reroute point. Next, go to the Global Skin Normal Map group and add in a mix node, and set it to Vector. Connect the Global Skin Normal Map group to the A input on the vector mix, then connect the vector mix to the displacement output. Go to your color ramp and create a duplicate. Then go to the reroute point and plug that into the new color ramp. Plug the color ramp into the vector's factor, then put an invert node into that connection. The invert node makes it so both color ramps have similar pin placements, for more ease of use. Now, with these nodes set up, I can mask out the weights where the water is dripping down. I can also control the intensity with the color ramp. If you want even more control, add a color ramp before the bump map node. This will allow you to increase the height of the drips. If this spiderweb of nodes is becoming a little hard to understand, then I recommend you frame the nodes. Just select a node and press Ctrl-J to frame it, then press N to bring up the side menu. Go to Node and rename the label. You should do this to all the color ramps, so you have a better understanding of which is doing what. Lastly, the problem we have now is that the water isn't transparent, and is relying solely on the top coat's color value. Go to the DAZ Skin Texture node and drag its connector to the top coat's color input. This will make the sections you have masked project the DAZ skin texture. Once you have plugged it in, reduce the specular 0 value to get a nice, clear result. This is just a temporary solution. Later on, we will be replacing this with the global skin texture itself. We can delete the DAZ textures, mix, and group node in the meantime, as they're no longer needed. Now, let's prepare this node cluster so we can copy it into all our global skin materials. First, highlight every node we just added, except the WetFX texture and the DAZ skin texture. Then right-click and make it a group. Adjust its position so everything is nice and neat. And rename the group to Wet Skin. Now before we copy this into our global skin materials, let's swap out this DAZ skin texture with our global skin texture. Go into your global skin material and find the principal BSDF for the skin tone you are using. You will see a node called AO, which will be the final node connected to the base color. Create a reroute point or drag a connector from the AO node. Drag that new connection all the way down to the group's output. On the outside, the global skin menu will now have a new output. Drag that new output's connector to the wet skin group and replace the DAZ skin textures connection. Now, your wet skin overlay will be using the global skin's texture directly. You can delete the DAZ skin texture now, as we don't need it anymore. Next up, copy the wet skin group and WetFX overlay texture. When you paste it into a new global skin material, make sure to change the overlay texture to that material's body part. Then, connect all the nodes to the group. You will have to go into the global skin menu again and drag that final color input to the group's output before plugging it into the wet skin group. Lastly, plug the shader into the surface and the result into the displacement. Then repeat these steps for every material. Once you are done, if you go into the wet skins group, you'll be able to control the overlay's result for the entire character. I would also recommend making a backup of this group in a default state before you make any changes, so you don't lose your default settings. Remember to unlink the backup group and make sure to create a new backup if you end up using the current one. Finally, let's make an on-off switch. Create a mix shader and a vector node. Plug the shader and the result for the wet skin group into the A input for both nodes. Then plug the global skin menu and the normal map into the B input for both nodes. Finally, plug the mix shader and the vector into the surface and the displacement. If you set the factor to 1 on both of these nodes, the unaffected global skin texture will replace the wet skin overlay version. Setting the factor back to 0 will bring back the wet skin. Turn these two nodes into a group and rename it to wet skin on and off, then paste it into every global skin material and hook it up. Now, there's one last thing I want to do before I finish. If you take a look at the original global skin texture for skin tone 1, you will see that it has a lot of detail. More detail, in fact, than my DAZ skin texture. So what if I could use them both together? Go into the global skin menu for the torso, and go to where your DAZ skin texture is. Copy one of the albedo textures, and paste it next to your DAZ skin texture. Copy the name of that skin texture. Then, press the folder button. If you were using skin tone 1, then search for torso 01. Once you have loaded that texture, hold Shift and drag a line through the texture's node string connections to create a reroute point. If you plug the global skin texture into that point, it will apply to the character. But I want to use my DAZ skin texture, so create a mix shader and plug these two textures in. Then connect that to the reroute point. You can now see my DAZ skin texture is now overlaid on top of my global skin texture. Set the node's blend mode to darken, then set the factor to 1 so the DAZ skin texture has the most influence. To control the intensity of the global skin texture, add in an RGB curve in front of it. Adjust its values until you get the result you want. Now, when I switch between the DAZ skin texture by itself and the global skin overlay version, you can see the added detail. Put both those nodes into a group and name it Skin Mixer. Then copy that group and the global skin texture into all your materials. Make sure to set the global skin texture to the correct body part for each material. Once you're done, you'll be able to control the intensity of the original skin texture for all materials. But there's still one issue, which is that this belly button is too dark. So to fix this, in edit mode, edge select around it, then go to select loops, and then to select loops in a region, which will highlight it. I then go into the material tab and add a new global skin material for the body, which I then turn into a copy. I then assign this material to the selected faces. In that material copy, I unlink the global skin menu as it's a group, and any changes within it will have an effect on other materials. I then go into the global skin menu and reconnect the DAZ skin texture. And now, the dark belly button has been removed. I also don't like how shiny the belly button is, so I cut the roughness connection and increase its value. Now, I'm done. Let's set up our Blender scene for a render. Make sure to use a high resolution and a high sample rate to bring out as much global skin detail as possible. Lastly, one of the best things about DAZ is that by default, all its UV maps will be compatible with each other, even though you can change the shape of your character. Which means, if I copy this character and paste it into a different scene, for example, this Venice Beach-inspired scene, which is utilizing my cafe girl from my Ultimate Workflow video. Once pasted in, I can then just swap out her DAZ materials with my pre-made global skin materials. So now, my cafe girl has global skin materials with all my group controls at the ready. Anyway, thanks for watching, and stay tuned, as in my next video, I will be showing you a workflow for setting up a sunbathing scene using a DAZ character with global skin, so make sure you're subscribed.